Rain speaks on leaded glass tonight, a language of small, patient knocks that count the hours between one breath and the next. It begins on the dome and slides down the panes in thin, rhythmic lines, and the library listens. The old timbers answer with a long, low settling like a purr, and somewhere below the stacks, the coal stove sighs as it gives up a little more heat. In the center of that warm hush, beneath the rounded skylight, Lily wakes to the sound and to the particular domestic certainty of her own hands. She moves as if she were being careful with an old thing, because she is. The tea nook under the dome has the soft geometry of a private harbor, a circle of high-backed chairs, a low table scarred by years of cups, and a samovar that keeps company with a small copper kettle. A lamp with a green, scalloped shade throws its light like a private sunset across a pile of spines. The lamplight makes the dust in the air seem deliberate, each mote an invited guest. Lily crosses the worn rug with the steady, negligible step of someone who knows which floorboard will complain and which will remain loyal. She puts coals to the stove, bowls a few last embers into their hearth with a practiced hand, and stokes a little warmth back into the room until the chill that lived in the seams of the window feels politely rebuffed. She prefers to make tea by gestures, slow, habitual movements that act as a kind of composure. The kettle clicks as it comes to a boil, polite as an apology. She lifts it, the brass warm through her palm, and pours water over a stitched bag of leaves, as if smoothing a shawl over a sleeping shoulder. The aroma curls, bergamot, and a low, rooty thing. And Lily watches the steam with an interest that is almost tender. While the tea infuses, she shapes pastries from yesterday's dough, pressing the edges with a quick, knowing thumb, folding in a smattering of warm fruit, dusting the lot with a soft shower of sugar that catches the lamplight and becomes a small constellation of crystals. Outside, the rain keeps speaking. Inside, Lily listens and answers with small comforts: a saucer for crumbs, a folded napkin, a cup set just so, its handle following the same gentle angle as the bend in her fingers. She arranges the lamps as though guiding wayward stars back to the place they belong. One for the table, another dimmer one by the reading chair, where Seamus favors a certain angle of light. A candle in the alcove for Rose to tend her sprouted pots by. Each light is a soft accord, amber notes set against the cool blue-gray of the night beyond the glass. The building hums low, a steady breath, the settling of beams, the faint creak where old wood remembers the rain. Patter, click. Small, repeated words that become the hidden metronome of the room. If you wish to stay with the drift, lower your lights and make yourself comfortable. The regulars come as they always do, as if the hum of the place had an address in their memories. First is Seamus, with a cane that keeps him company and a pocket of things. A brass thimble that has seen better years, a leather strap with a mend in the corner, and a tail curled like a ribbon in the bottom of his coat. He arrives silent at first, then offers the faintest of coughs that is his way of announcing himself. His face is a geography of small kindnesses, lines that fold by the eyes where laughter has rested for decades, a particular cleft at the chin that happens when he is thinking of an especially good biscuit. He settles into his favorite chair, the one that cradles him at the back, and watches the lamplight make maps upon his hands. Rose comes with soil under her nails and the soft surety of someone who has negotiated seasons and known the precise argument between a sprout and the dark. She carries 2 small pots in a basket, lids of damp moss tucked over each like little capes. The smell she brings is green and loamy and oddly consoling. It threads into the steam of the tea like a second, quieter fragrance. She drops the basket beside the hearth, pats the lip of a pot as one might pat a child's shoulder, and looks around as if to take the room's measure and delight in what she finds. The twins arrive later, as twins do, together and separately. Mara on one hip with a small pocketed weight of curiosities, a handful of coins, a brass button with an engraved blossom, a paper boat folded from yesterday's ledger. Joss trails behind her, earnest in a way that makes the air itself feel less complicated. He carries a lantern with a battered glass that throws an uneven halo when he sets it down. They speak in clipped, eager phrases, passing a joke between them with the fast current of those whose language has been practiced in secret. They perch at the edge of the circle, toes tucked, and wait for permission to commit small mischiefs. Another spoon borrowed, a story half told. Words in the room are spare. Conversation is a weave of gestures and ellipses. Seamus offers a fragment of a story about a book that will not stay closed, and Rose answers with the contented accounting of her seedlings, naming each by the sort of pet names that gardeners use, gentle private words. Their talk folds around the routine acts, mugs being warmed by hands, sugar being measured by the flick of a wrist, pastry transferred from tray to plate, with a care that is almost ceremonial. The twins listen, and occasionally a phrase from them. "Did you once see the moon through the atlas?" Catches a small laugh and a rustle of movement as someone reaches for more tea. The hum and click and patter punctuate these moments like a lullaby's recurring refrain. Lily moves through these familiar gestures as conductor and guest both. She makes space and offers utensils and listens with an attention that acts as the room's still center. When someone is quiet, she is the one to fold a shawl across their knees. When someone needs direction in a question that could be answered by any of a dozen books, she is the one who slides a worn volume across the table with the specific page already bookmarked by memory. She keeps small things in odd pockets, twine, a spare button, a bit of beeswax, and produces them in moments when a problem appears to be simple mischief rather than real trouble, which is why the hairline of water first looks like a trivial newcomer, a small bead making its cautious way along the seam of the skylight. Lily is the one who notices it, because her job, as she thinks of it, is to notice. A droplet that ought to have been intercepted by the leaded glass finds instead the tiny, traitorous seam in the dome's stitching. It hangs for a moment at the edge of the pane, and then, because the rain insists, traces a fine, stubborn line of wet that the lamplight catches and pronounces with a silver thread. She considers the best course with the patient calm of someone accustomed to mending what needs mending. The cracked seam is no more than a hairline. It does not threaten the roof, nor will a storm swallow the room whole. Yet the rain that finds its way in is the sort that lodges in the small, persistent corners of life. A slow, persistent cold that sits in the bones of a chair and in the weave of an upholstery. Lily measures it in gestures. One hand brushed over the sill, a thumb pressing at the wood where the damp has begun its quiet trespass. She thinks of waiting until the morrow when the joiner could come with wax and a brace, when daylight might make work less awkward, when the ladder could be steadied with daylight hands. She thinks, too, of the company gathered now, how warmth is a party best shared, and how small repairs are often the sort of thing best attended to with friends, so that the mending itself becomes a reason to pass buttered slices, and to sing a low, fitting hum while one's fingers make order. A hairline becomes a needle of rain, and that needle, though insubstantial, sets the air to a new attentiveness. Rose, who knows the patience of seedlings, hears Lily's half-breath and looks up from her pot. The twins both lean forward in their chair-perched eagerness, and Seamus taps his cane in a way that is a question more than a command. There is no rush, no recrimination. Instead, one by one, the room supplies its inventory. A strip of leather found in Seamus's pocket. A spool of waxed thread Lily keeps for mending book bindings. A brass button that will not be used for fastening, but for weighing a patch down, and a square of oiled cotton the twins found tucked beneath a cushion during a previous search, and have been keen to place in a position of sudden usefulness. The repair, when it decides to consider itself, arrives as a communal script. Hands are offered and arranged. Someone produces a small ladder from the stacks, an old library ladder on a pulley, its wood dressed in a pale sheen from many hands. It comes forward with a groan of its own, and is set against the reading alcove where the skylight curves above like a watchful eye. A lamp is dimmed so as not to glare upon the wet place, and another is shifted to make a pool of lamplight on the ladder's rung. Even the tea seems to still its steaming as the room collectively considers the seam. They do not rush to a plan. Instead, there is a sort of conversation conducted by objects. Lily lays the leather strip on the table and rolls a length of waxed thread between her fingers. Seamus holds the brass thimble up and smiles with the memory of where his own fingers once slipped a stitch along a coat. Rose passes a dab of beeswax that's the color of soft gold. The twins, delighted to be useful, arrange a selection of small, translucent papers and thin, pressed glass prisms, little things folded and kept for the day when being asked to shine would finally make sense. "Not an expedition," Seamus says in a voice that makes the room lean close. "Just a neighborhood stitch." They begin with inspection, which is its own gentle ritual. Lily climbs the ladder first, hand finding rung, foot landing with the steady care of someone who spends her nights in libraries and knows the calculus of steps. The skylight is cool to the touch. Under the leaded ribs, the hairline seam looks almost filigree, a silver vein in the dark. Rain has been patient there, and a fine bead has gathered in the seam by the place where two panes meet. When Lily presses gently with a finger, water mushrooms outward, then treads back as if embarrassed to be seen. She brings the leather up then, simple, supple, oiled in a way that smells of tack and time. Chases lends his thimble. Rose has smoothed the wax that will keep the thread true, and the twins hold the lamp low so that the seam catches the light, and the stitches can be counted like little, precise promises. They set the leather against the outside of the glass, and Lily speaks in small, soft sounds as she works. A hum that keeps time with the threading of the needle. A click as the thimble meets the end of the thread. Stitch by careful stitch, they lay the strip along the seam, and the waxed thread bites into leather with a sound like a small agreement. There is a certain intimacy to mending in the lamplight. Fingers get close. Breath becomes an item in the air that warms the place where the needle passes. Talk dissolves into the rhythm of the work. Quiet observations about where a stitch should fall. A reminder about where to knot and where not to pull too tight. A small whispered counsel about how the leather might be decorated. Joss produces a scrap of the twins' translucent paper and threads it onto a thin wire. Mara arranges a brass button so it will act as a tiny weight on the leather's edge. Not for necessity, but because the library likes adornment even in its repairs. Make it pretty, someone says, and the room agrees with soft laughter. They are not doing merely what must be done. They are changing the crack into something that will be seen and cherished. A seam that will have in it the memory of the night, of shared hands and songs hummed under breath. The patchwork becomes, in their making, a small badge of togetherness. Outside the dome, the rain takes one of its more insistent breaths, and the sound grows a shade more urgent. For a moment, a finer needle of water finds the seam at its furthest point, and runs in a thin line like a small comet, and every face in the room lifts at the same time. It is only a drop, an acknowledgment of weather, but it is in that acknowledgment that decision arrives in full. Lily has to consider whether what they have started will be enough as it is, or whether they must go further, to fashion an overlay, a protective cover that will take the rain for the night and remain as a new, sensible ornament by morning. They talk about possibilities the way neighbors do. A pane of oiled cloth stretched across, layered and clipped with brass buttons, a span of fine netting that will make a sea of tiny beads rather than one traitorous seam, a small removable roof of card edged in leather, capable of being taken away when the weather goes fair. Rose suggests a strip of waxed linen old enough to have learned from previous storms. Seamus laughs and insists that the twins' paper prisms be hung along the edge, to catch lamplight and fool the rain with prettiness. Lily, who has a natural bent to preserve books and skin and tea, imagines a cover that will be both practical and an excuse to hang something lovely in the dome, something they can look at midnight and remember how a small fissure became an evening's celebration. They measure with the worn eye of people who work in books rather than rulers. A broom handle becomes a substitute for a measuring rod, and a piece of string held between two fingers will stand in for precision. The ladder is shifted, the lamp lowered, and hands reach for what they need in a choreography that has no rehearsal but plenty of practice. Beeswax is warmed between palms and rubbed along thread to make it dutiful. A little oil is softened into the leather to make it bend instead of crack. The twins, thrilled to be given the honor of arranging the little prisms, string them together with delicate care, their fingers patient and precise as if the soft work had been practice for years. At some point, the act of mending blooms into an unplanned festivity. Someone finds an old handbell, its rim dulled by use, and gives it a tentative ring that sounds like a hand at the edge of a melody. A voice, Seamus's perhaps, takes up a fragment of an old song and hums it low. It is a tune without words at first, then a line that meshes with the hum of the building and the tap of the rain. Voices join, not in exuberant chorus, but in a close, intimate blending that warms the moment more than the hearth could. The lamplight seems to listen and throw back more careless gold than it had before. Plates appear, unexpected, as if conjured. Fresh pastries cut into neighborly pieces, a pot of something sweet and spiced set upon the table. Warmed hands reach for food, for a cup, for a bit of conversation to hold alongside the sewing. In these moments the crack is no longer merely a fault. It is the reason for an assembly, the small mischief that invited the lodgers of the bookshelf to show up and be needed. Where a seam was threatening to allow cold, there is now a string of small communal gestures that fit together as snug as the stitches Lily takes. The practical and the ornamental fold into one another. Leather and paper, thimble and brass button, beeswax and song, all meet along the curved lip of the dome and become something new. They sew for a while, and then a pause arrives, not from weariness, but because the work asks for consideration. Lily holds the leather up to the light, and the strip takes on a new character. Stitched across with waxed thread, fringed with prism and button, it looks less like a repair and more like a pennant from an old private festival. The twins stand back and clap, just a little, because clapping is a language of undeclared joy. Rose breathes as if a plant had finally found a new place to root. And Seamus, with that half-smile that often lives on his face, taps his cane twice against the floor as one might settle an account. Yet the seam is not entirely done. There remains the question of the outside overlay, of a cover that will bear the night's weather without fuss. The ladder waits, the lamp waits, and the rain continues its conversation above them. Lily thinks of the hours that will follow, of the way a repaired thing keeps memory like a pocket holds an old handkerchief. She imagines, for a moment, the morning after. Lamplight catching a string of tiny prisms. The dome like a constellation turned inside out. The room full of the soft numbers of those who had been part of it. But the immediate business is still the night and the making of a solution that is both useful and tender. They lay out materials on the table again. Extra leather, a strip of oiled cotton, a roll of woolen ribbon that might help keep the cover in place, and a handful of pins that look as if they have been waiting to be useful for decades. Someone suggests a sketch, and Rose, with the patient line of a gardener planning a bed, begins to mark a design on a scrap. Where buttons might fasten, where the prisms will hang to catch lamplight, where a window in the cover might allow the little bell to ring out if the wind should insist. The plan is small and precise. It speaks of evenings and not of ceremonies. As they arrange the plan, a noise rises from the stacks. Soft, a minor clatter as a book slides from a shelf, perhaps knocked by someone leaning to reach down a measure of string. For a moment it could be read as mischief, but Lily knows it for the room's way of reminding them that it, too, has been listened to. She looks up with a smile that keeps urgency out of its eyes. This, she thinks, is precisely the sort of night that remembers hands as well as weather. They begin cutting the oiled cotton, the snip of the scissors a small punctuation. Thread is looped and knotted. The lamp is angled to give clearer sight where their fingers must be small and exact. Seamus climbs the ladder to hold the patch from the inside, while Lily works the outer edge from the table, and the twins are given the honor of hanging the first prism just beyond reach. A task that makes them stand as if they were at the prow of a ship, though they stand upon hardwood and bookcloth. At the moment the first prism swings into place, the rain takes on a different voice. Less insistent and more interested, as if moved by the sight of human hands arranging beauty beneath it. A bead that had been threatening the seam slides back into its place and stays there like a small spectator. The patch looks less like a repair and more like an offering. The cover they are constructing is not only a shelter, but an emblem of how small troubles make room for softness. And yet there is the other seam, the one that sits inside Lily's mind, the one that asks whether all of this will hold until morning's light, whether the waxed thread will be enough to tame the weather the rain may yet bring. She is the one who measures risks like a librarian weighs books, balancing the love for a book's brittle pages against the insistence that some things are worth keeping as they are. Tonight, she thinks, they have already chosen to value the evening itself. The question of whether their labor will withstand an entire downpour is secondary to the fact of having come together, hands entwined around a common, very ordinary task. They test the patch beneath the lamplight before finishing all the edges. The ladder is shifted closer, and Lily, standing with the thimble on her thumb, feels the leather as it meets the pane. In that close light the seam looks less like a fault and more like a new line in the geography of the dome, added to the map of years. The twins hold their breath in a way that makes the room slightly quieter. The hum of the building seems to lean in with them, and the patter of rain reduces to a respectful murmur. For a second, poised on the ladder and held by the eyes of her friends, Lily imagines the dome as a sky pinned together by familiar hands. Then, as if to test the truth of that imagination, a single droplet plucks itself from the seam and falls. It is the kind of small thing that will stop a breath, not for fear, but for the fragile urgency of attention. The droplet catches the lamplight as it drops and for an instant becomes a little globe of liquid amber. And somewhere in the hush that follows, every person in the room gives the same small, private answer to the same quiet question. They are ready to be fully practical now. There is the matter of the outer cover to fashion and secure, the matter of extra heat if the night deepens, and the matter of making sure the patch will bear the long testing of rain and time. Rose fetches a strip of waxed linen from her basket. Seamus unties an extra length of leather from his coat, and the twins press their small hands together as if to conjure courage. Lily ties a knot in her thread and looks up at the dome, where clouds move in a weathered, steady parade. The lamp sheds its oval of light, the pastry crumbs have been collected and wrapped, and the tea has warmed several hands. Outside the window, the rain studies the world and decides what to do next. For the moment it is content to drum the glass and leave the inside to its work. The ladder stands ready. The patch is half-stitched, and the room, which has sewed itself together in a different sense, holds its breath with a soft, almost reverent patience. It is in this exact pause, the kind that a novel might call a hinge, that they discover something else tucked at the edge of the leaded glass. A faint, older line of repair that older hands had once made and left almost invisible beneath another layer of time. For a heartbeat, Lily is reminded that things carry histories like pocketed bones, and that her own small stitch is another sentence in a long, slow conversation. She reaches up, fingers careful, and traces the older seam as though reading a secret. The motion makes the leather of her palm shine. The lamplight pools against her knuckles. The room seems to lean close, listening to the scratch of her nail against old mending. They have begun the work, then, and they have also, in starting, found the past waiting to be acknowledged. Plans shift to incorporate what is found. An idea is offered to overlay the new cover so it sits comfortably with the older line, to let both speak their story. The air grows a little warmer. Coal, hot tea, and the slow heat of hands, which is the library's own small weather. It is not yet finished. There is more to do, more stitches to take, more prisms to string, more small songs to hum while fingers thread. But for now they have something that, at least in the lamplight, looks like a promise. Outside, the rain quickens as if to remind them that the night is patient, but not endlessly so. Inside, Lily ties another knot, and the room prepares to lift the half-finished cover up to the dome. Each act is a small, precise choreography. Seamus steadies the ladder, Rose holds the lamp, the twins hand up pins and odds and ends, and Lily climbs with the careful concentration of someone who has spent her life preserving things one stitch at a time. The patch, heavy with the small ornaments and damp with the breath of the room, hangs like an offering poised to meet the sky. They have reached this moment together. The ladder creaks under careful feet. The lamplight casts long, softer shadows, and the rain speaks on leaded glass with the same steady patience it had when Lily first woke. The door to the stacks sits ajar, the hush of other books like a congregation waiting in the next room. The work is not done, but the first arc of it, discovery, gathering, the first stitches, has been shaped into a shared story. They are about to lift the cover into place, to press leather to glass, to see whether their collective making will fool the rain or teach it a new habit. And, as Lily reaches the top rung, the library seems to hold a breath with her, as if it too were listening for the small sound of a successful stitch. Lily reaches the top rung with the kind of steadiness that is mostly habit and a little faith. The ladder holds her as it has held many hands before. The wood gives a small, familiar creak, and then settles into silence. Below, the circle of lamps throws a pool of golden patience that pools up to meet her. Above, the dome is a cool blue bowl threaded with lead, rain making faint, secret trajectories between panes. For a moment she allows the room's hush to be the map she trusts, the hum of the stove, the click of a spoon on saucer, the patter that keeps time with the beating of so many small, ordinary hearts. She fits the half-finished cover to the seam, and, with Seamus steadying her foot, presses the leather as if tucking a shawl into place. The leather takes to the glass with a slight, satisfying sound. Not a triumph, not a rending, merely the small private union of two things that wish to shelter the same space. Lily tugs a final stitch, knots it with care, and tucks the thread end beneath a fold of waxed linen. A weight of relief, as soft as breath, lies across her shoulders. The patch holds. The seam has new company. Stitches like brass stars, a fringe of tiny prisms that catch lamplight and make the wet outside seem politely invited rather than intrusive. The rain continues. It must. But its voice is now tempered by the artistry of human hands. There is a kind of applause that is made without clapping. Small, pleased noises, a soft huff from Rose, Seamus's cane tapping the floor twice, the twins' mouths forming an impressed O. Someone, by way of finishing, gives the little handbell another ring. Its note is thin and bright and sets a ripple through the room like a pebble sent into still water. The bell's sound is an acknowledgment. The work has been done, and the work has been festooned with what the library does best, a certain tasteful, accidental decoration. They do not rush to pack away. Instead, the library lingers over its own success. Plates are refilled by hands that have not stopped their practice of care. Tea is poured and passed, steam folding into lamplight. Seamus tells the rest of the tale he had clipped earlier, finishing the sentence about a book that would not stay closed and revealing, with a smile, that it had been a commonplace atlas whose owner had been more in need of company than of maps. His voice folds into the hum the building keeps, and the twins, having been given small tasks during the mending, are allowed to unspool the moment into play, arranging prisms across the table so the light breaks into a scatter of tiny rainbows like a children's constellation. Lily descends the ladder as slowly as she had climbed it, and the patch looks different from below. Not merely a repair, but a little theater. Eyes and hands made visible in the seam where rain had tried to be an intruder. She brushes a smear of wax from her sleeve with one thumb, a motion that is both practical and ceremonial. In that little act, she sets aside the toll the night has taken and claims the quiet authority that comes of seeing a thing through. Not bad for a neighborhood stitch, Seamus says again, quieter now, as if the room might take license to repeat modesty. He reaches for a pastry and breaks off a piece, offering it to Rose without looking. She accepts, and the twins crowd in for crumbs with the deliberateness of those who have been fed on such moments. The lamplight composes a gentle constellatory map across the table, and Lily feels, as she often does, that the room is a small planet of its own making. Saucers for seas, chairs for harbors, and the dome above the sky that will hold whatever weather the night insists upon. Rose, who tends seedlings as if each one were a small sermon, looks about with the satisfaction of someone who measures weather, not by fury, but by how a window keeps its company of plants. She checks the pots she brought in, tucks moss back into place, and murmurs to a sprout as one might hush a child. The twins, their mischief sated now by the earnestness of usefulness, settle with elbows on knees and heads bent toward a scrap of ledger, where Joss, with the exaggerated solemnity of a small conspirator, reads an invented list of the library's inventory. 1 ladder, 2 sauces. He misnames the saucers, and the room laughs quietly because it is fresh and small, and laughter here in the lamplight takes the shape of a soft, contented cat. When the teapot is down to its last warm drizzle, Lily gathers the bits of used thread, the stray pins, the scissors used to cut the oiled cotton, and she wraps them into a small square of cloth she keeps for such things. The cloth is embroidered with a vine that has been added to by many hands, and now looks like a family tree of small stitches. She knots it, tucks the wrapped bundle into her apron pocket, and feels, in that small gesture, that the night's work is not merely concluded, but preserved. Preservation, she thinks, is the library's soft faith. The twins, whose evening's usefulness has served to make them sleep-ready, begin to display the first signs of surrender. Mara, whose pocket of curiosities had produced the brass button and the paper boat, finds herself folding a scrap of the ledger and placing it carefully beside her chair as if it were a talisman. Joss yawns in a way that makes the light seem heavier where it falls upon his face. Lily watches them, and, without making a ceremony of it, reaches for an old shawl and lays it across their shoulders. It is the kind of simple, unspoken blessing that takes the place of a story at bedtime. A cloth that says, without words, "You are seen. Lie down. If you would, let your shoulders loosen now," Lily says softly, and her voice is an invitation that is both personal and communal. Let the room hold you for a while. The words are not a command, but an offering. A listener anywhere might, if they wished, make the same small motion of letting shoulders fall and breathe out. The room begins to slow. Plates are stacked and tucked away. The last crumbs are cleared with a practiced thumb. The samovar is coaxed to a final quiet. Seamus takes a small book from under his coat, a slim volume whose spine has been repaired more times than anyone can count, and places it beside his chair as a comfort, a thing whose presence is as habitual as the cane that leans against the arm of his seat. Rose sweeps her hands through soil on a napkin and smooths her skirt, the remnants of potting tucked into neat folds at the hem. The twins are given a page from an old atlas as a lullaby. They learn, in the way children do, to find calm in the simple lines that mark rivers and hills. There is one more thing to do before the library truly leans toward rest. They decide, almost by common sense, to hang the small array of prisms and paper that the twins have threaded together along the rim of the dome. It will be, Lily says, and no one disagrees, a line of rain windows. Tiny ornaments that will catch lamplight and make the night inside the dome feel like a private constellation. They string the prisms along a length of twine, tying each with a careful knot, and the act of hanging them becomes another stitch in the evening's seam. Some are glass and swing with a neat little sound. Some are pressed papers that fold the light into soft colors. A few are little mirrors that scatter 100 small moons across a table when the angle is right. Seamus retrieves an old spool of thread, the sort whose label has long since been lost to time, and, with hands that are sure though they tremble a touch, he affixes the first tie. The prisms catch the lamplight and throw it into a pattern that makes the walls of books look, for a moment, like the inside of an illuminated manuscript. The twins hang theirs closest to where they sat. Their pieces catch each other when the string moves and make a delicate, chime-like sound that is in no way loud enough to wake anyone who sleeps, but perfect for those who prefer to drowse with music beneath their eyelids. When the final knot is tied, the dome looks different. A garland of little lights and prisms that make the rain's sound smaller and closer, a companion rather than a stranger. Lily steps back and allows herself a rueful smile, not prideful, merely pleased. There is the same sort of joy in this as there is in arranging a favorite book on a shelf so its spine looks exactly right, an act that is both aesthetic and deeply practical. The rain is still there, and will be there again tomorrow perhaps, but now it is framed, evidenced, made into a window that announces the library's habit of turning inconvenience into ornament. They test the patched seam once more, a small ceremonial check rather than a nervous one. Rose holds the lamp at just the right angle. Seamus keeps the ladder steady. The twins, at Lily's request, make a small show of blowing on the prisms so they tremble and catch the light. The room waits together, its breath synchronized with the hum of the stove and the persistent tap of the rain. When no more water finds its way inside than it is wont to do on nights such as these, the group allows itself an unforced relief. The patch has passed the night's first examination. "Now then," Seamus says, and his voice is a soft seal on the evening's business. A word for the seam. Let it tell the story of tonight. He nods as if to the dome itself, which answers with its low, satisfied groan, the building's private purr. They sit, then, as the room settles into its own hush. The tea is down to the last dribble in the pot. The pastries have been reduced to crumbs like a map of generosity on the table. Conversation, from here on, becomes smaller and gentler. Seamus reads a passage from his repaired book, a paragraph about small kindnesses where the diction is almost clumsy in its sincerity. And Rose murmurs a comment that turns into a memory of the first frost she ever coaxed a plant through. The twins, curling under the shawl, listen and allow the speech to fold them into sleep's slow attending. Lily, wrapping a napkin into the shape of a small pillow for a twin who must fall asleep somewhere more upright than others, moves without fuss. Each action is ordinary, and precisely because of that, profound. When at last the lamps are adjusted to their most forgiving glow, and the samovar makes its last polite click, the library's hum seems nearly audible as a single chord. Lily steps to the window and cups her hands to the coolness of the leaded glass. The rain beads there in the lamplight like little tremulous stars. She runs the pad of her finger along a line where the older repair meets the new, feeling the tiny ridge left by long-ago wax, and whispers a private benediction that has little to do with prayer and everything to do with gratitude. For hands offered, for hands taken, for stitches that hold. She has one last ritual to perform in this public room before she returns to her own alcove. From the small drawer beneath the tea-table, she takes a sand globe, a palm-sized vessel of fine, dull sand, marked with the hours of a single, slow minute. It is an object that has lived within the library's rituals for as long as anyone can remember. It is turned at the close of each night as an emblem of time being set aside for rest. Lily flips it over and watches the sand fall, a tiny, private waterfall that marks the moment when the room exchanges industry for repose. The sound of the sand is very light. It is almost nothing, and yet in that almost nothing the evening acknowledges its own ending. Seamus folds his book closed and blinks slowly, the faint pattern of lamplight making his lashes gold. Rose tucks a swath of cloth into her basket, covering her pots with the care of someone who leaves a garden to sleep under frost. The twins, now dozing, make small sounds like contented animals. Their breathing falls into the library's rhythm. The lamplight turns a last, weary gold across the faces gathered at the table, and then draws back into the lamps themselves, becoming contained and private. Lily gathers the remaining cups and plates with a slow economy. She wipes rims with a circular, precise gesture. She stacks saucers, lines up spoons, and places the sugar bowl to the side beneath its little lid. The patchwork of tools used in the mending, spool of thread, leather offcut, the little brass button that will now live as ornament rather than fastener. She places into a tin that has been used as a repository for such things. It is not a tidy tin. It is comfortable with being used. She folds the embroidered square of cloth around it like a small pausing place for any future repair. Then puts it in the drawer for the next time a seam decides it needs companions. As Lily moves, the room follows. The hum settles. The patter of rain softens into a lullaby's sotto voce. She takes one last passing look at the dome, where the rain windows swing with an easy, imperceptible motion, and where the outside weather is now politely framed by human making. The library is a creature of its own, breathing slow and content beneath the curved glass. Returning to her own alcove, Lily performs the personal rituals that are hers alone. She folds a cloth with the sort of exactness that makes space for other things. She places a small talisman, a round, worn pebble with a line of gold that she keeps for luck, on the bedside table beside the sand globe. She smooths the pillow, tucks the shawl that the twins had been wrapped in back into the drawer where odd linens sleep, and arranges a single page, folded on the small bedside shelf. A scrap of a poem she reads to herself sometimes when sleep is shy. Her hands keep moving, but each movement is a settling rather than labor. The heat from the hearth has mellowed into an even warmth that questions no one. She slips out of the dress she wears for evenings and into a simple gown of flannel, a garment that has, over the years, come to feel like the library's own hush embodied. The fabric breathes with her and seems to say, without need for words, that this is a place where people are allowed to be diminished into softness. The room is dim. The lamps in the main circle have been doused save for the one that rests beside her chair, a little crescent of light warm enough for reading but far enough from sleep. Lily takes the sand globe in thin hands and turns it over once more, watching the sand fall. She counts nothing. Instead, she allows the sand's slow passage to be a small companion to the breath she takes out, slowly, like a small house collapsing into itself for the night. She pauses a moment, hand over the globe, feeling the library's hum echoing in the bones of the building. She thinks of the seam up in the dome, now stitched and ornamented. She thinks of the faces at the table, tempered by the lamplight, and softened by the language of ordinary kindness. When she puts the globe down, it is with a sense that tonight the library has done something it does best. It has turned necessity into ritual, and repair into celebration. Before she lays her head to rest, Lily looks toward where the twins sleep in their borrowed corner, and, characteristically, she tends a small final business. She takes a scrap of paper and writes, in a slanted hand, a line that is half a list and half a benediction. Check leather, refill thread, replace prism string. She tucks this note into the tin with the mending tools, not as an order, but as memory made small. Then she murmurs the names of those who were present: Seamus, Rose, Mara, Joss, as if letting their names be the last thing she thinks before sleep. Names, after all, are a kind of holding. You may, if you like, draw a deep breath with her now. Let your shoulders ease. Let the room you are in be a library for your own rest. The twins' breathing becomes more improbable and adorable by the minute. Their small limbs give way to sleep, and for a while they resemble two boats turned inward on still water. Seamus, having tapped his cane once to make sure the world is where he left it, allows his jaw to unfurl and closes his eyes. Rose, with a small, satisfied smile, tucks a sprig of moss into the rim of her basket, as if leaving a note to her plants that their turn will come again tomorrow. Lily turns down the lamp by her bed to its smallest, kinder socket, and slips beneath a blanket that carries the soft scent of lavender, tucked there long ago by someone who took scent seriously. She does not make a speech. There is no need. Instead, she lies back and listens. The patter on the dome now sounds like a steady heart. The hum of the building has become a necessary chord. The click of cooling metal in the samovar is a tiny punctuation. Her breathing finds its pattern in the room's rhythm. She rests her hand over the talisman, feeling the pebble's little coin of gold, and lets that be enough. Outside, the rain writes its long, unhurried letters across the city. Up in the dome, the seam, stitched and ornamented, holds firm a new line in the library's map of nights. Inside, the air cools, and the lamps soften to a last private glow. Somewhere in that quiet, a small voice, Seamus's perhaps, or Rose's, hums a fragment of the tune that had started while they sewed. It is a hum without words. It is a line of sound like a thread drawn through a day and knotted at the end. If you would allow it, let that hum be a garment for your own thoughts. Let it take the edges off worry and make place for rest. In the hush that follows, there is no rush to do anything but be. Lily listens until her own breath slows, matching the library's pace. She thinks of the patched seam and of the way small hands had made something that now looks like celebration rather than fix. She thinks of the mornings and nights that will follow, of books that will be opened and closed, of the day the seam may be revisited. But for now, there is the one true business of the moment, the folding of day into night, stitched by ordinary kindness. Long after most sounds have dissolved into the background, the rain keeps its company with the dome, and the library keeps its vigil of lamplight. The little prisms catch occasional shafts and send motes of color skittering across the spines of books, like fireflies that are polite enough to remain where they are invited. The building breathes its low breath, the kind that feels as if it could cradle a city if given the chance. Lily's last waking action is a small one. She places the thimble Seamus lent her back into the tin, and she presses her thumb against the softened beeswax, smoothing a new surface for another night's work. It is an act that says, without boasting, that all hours are made of small economies of care. Then she closes her eyes. The story of the seam becomes, in the library's memory, a small folio. A night when a hairline of water invited a community to gather. In days to come, someone will note the added ornament. Someone else will find that the patch has a brass button that winks like a punctuation. The twins will tell the tale with the flourish of those who were there and important, and perhaps a child who is not yet born into these pages will read it and feel content at the thought of a library that stitched itself together. For now, though, the dome is the sky, and the sky is stitched. The building hums, the rain patters, the prisms breathe color, and the people within fold into the book of night. If this evening's drift soothed you, you may subscribe for more quiet stories. But for now, leave the lights gentle, abandon the day's tightness, and let your shoulders find the soft curve of the pillow. The library will keep its watch. You are allowed to rest. Good night.